And good evening and welcome, at least if you're joining us here live on the Red, Gold, and Bold stream as we kick off live on Tuesday night at 9 o'clock. Holy cow. What holy buckets. Is everything okay there? All of a sudden it sounded like there was an avalanche going on in the background.
Jeff breathing hard.
Getting fired up, getting psyched up for the event.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good to know. It is Jeff Chadiha from NFL Network and NFL.com. He's the one breathing hard. Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus joins us as always. PFF.com. Read his great work there. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB as we are off and running here on, dangerous grounds, guys. COVID's back in a big way. We thought it was a big deal last week. They moved 3 games and now the positive tests just keep on coming. I think it was 47 around the league on Monday. The Chiefs had 7 more to the 3 they had yesterday. That's 10 new ones added on to the 4 that are still on the list. Certainly optimistic that those 4 will be back from last week. But Jeff, this is not where you want to be in the course of this season right now. When you look at where they are, where do you think the Chiefs sit right now? First of all, are we going to be playing this game on Sunday at 3:25? What do we expect now with the way this looks right here?
Well, look, you don't know what to expect at this stage just because you know that game's been moved. It's a hard call because, some of these guys are coming back, as you mentioned. Some of these players with the new protocols may be able to play, some of the more recent players. But the league also, you look at what happened last year with the Denver Broncos. They trotted out a practice squad receiver to play quarterback in a game. And so we're getting to that point in the season where it's harder and harder to move games. You're getting pushed up against the end of the season. At this stage, I think they play it, but certainly it's an indication of where we are with this thing and how much I think all of us have exhaled and felt like we were moving forward with life and that all of a sudden now the reality that there's still a pandemic going on. There's a new variant in place. Talking to friends last week when Chris Jones and Willie Gay were going on it, I just said, just as every other team in the league, you see 1 or 2 guys, trust me, there's going to be a lot more coming. And that's what you're seeing with the Chiefs. To me, it also speaks to just the way this league is, that all the euphoria that's followed them beating the Chargers on Thursday night, watching Tennessee and New England lose over the weekend, getting the top seed is now followed by the sheer despair, the terror that comes with knowing you may be out there without a lot of key star players in games that still play a huge role in what's going to happen in the postseason.
Yeah, it is, Eric. It is kind of the wake-up call, I think, for all of us that we're not done with the pandemic. You and I discussed this a little bit today, and my feeling has been, and I asked this of Andy Reid on Monday, I asked it of Adam Schefter, and I think it's true we could ask it of all of ourselves. Were we all just a little bit stupid here in our approach to things and thinking that, hey, we didn't need to hunker down when the cold and flu season gets started? I mean, it just makes sense. It's just common sense, as a matter of fact, that the numbers would go up.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is we have long since passed the reasonable discussions about things, right? We were all talking in August about, the issues that guys like Cole Beasley had with the vaccination stuff. And not only were they unvaccinated, but they were loudly opposed to a lot of the protocols that they had agreed to per their, not collective bargaining agreement, but their, the folks in their particular, Players Association, right? So so they were we were, and as a society, it was also sort of the same thing. We're never going to lock down again, nor probably should we, but we're still having issues over whether people should wear masks, whether people should be vaccinated. So we were just as a league, right, following sort of the tenor of society in general, and society in general was sort of lax about this and was caught off guard by Delta and Omicron as well. So to single the league out, I think maybe that's not necessarily as fair, but you're absolutely right. I mean, in hindsight, playing the season as though it was sort of a normal season with a few protocols was ultimately the wrong decision.
Yeah, and where do we go from here, Jeff? I mean, like, what are the numbers? What does it have to be for this game to end up being played on a Monday or a Tuesday?
I don't know, and part of the problem is that it varies based on circumstance. It felt as if the games that were pushed were getting to a place, where you're talking about maybe 20 is a magic number. I think that's what Cleveland was at with 21 guys. The Washington football team was there. Maybe that's what you need to be at. The hope with these new protocols that came into place last week was that you'd have more players getting off the list faster and less players getting hit and landing on the list. But it's just the opposite's happening. And so, I get that here there's a great clamor for it to be moved, but I'm sure in Pittsburgh they're thinking, let's play this game. let's play it on Sunday noon and we're ready to go. That's what Mark Davis was saying when the Raiders were playing the Browns and that game got moved. And it's a valid complaint. It's not. We're going to go through this for the rest of the year. Right. We are going to have situations where people are going to feel aggrieved if certain teams are getting the opportunity to try to get healthier to play these games when other teams aren't having these kind of problems. I don't know. I think you should play the game.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, though. Is there a limit? Last year it was very publicized that there was some kind of limit. Was it, in college football, you had to have X number of offensive line and X number of defensive linemen. And if you drop below those thresholds at those positions, the game was automatic, right? They had these numeric numbers. It certainly feels like the idea here is we're not going to put any kind of, numeric standard on it because we want to play the game. And like I said, Eric said, well, we're not going to lock down and we shouldn't lock down. You want to play and I think we should play if we can. Does this enter dangerous territory though, Jeff, if there aren't some kind of, thought out in advance numbers that are necessary to play a game?
It is a bit dangerous, but this has always been a move the goalpost type situation. I think we're learning about this on the fly, and the league has been trying to govern and legislate on the fly here. And the problem with that is you always open yourself up to criticism. I remember vividly the Patriots flying in here on 2 planes last year to Kansas City to play the Chiefs without a starting quarterback and one day to get ready for the game. It was just a bizarre circumstance. But they came out and played it, and guess what? They almost won a game. The Browns, as much as we're talking about their game getting moved and what they were losing, they almost beat the Raiders. And so there is that thing to consider here. But ultimately, this is just the NFL does not want to go back to where it was last year. And part of why we are where we are is because of that mentality of let's fill the stadiums up. Let's get people excited about football again. Let's go out and play and have fun and try to limit the talk about the pandemic. But in doing that, you're also talking about 20-something-year-old guys, men who have families and kids out there who are running around and putting themselves in situations that they wouldn't have put themselves in last year. And so I don't know how you put the genie back in the bottle here. I just think at this stage, it's about moving forward and doing the best you can.
And Eric, for the most part, we've got, players are if they're getting ill, it's in a minor variety, right? It's of a minor nature. Both sides want to play the games. Let's be clear. This isn't Taskmaster owners saying we're going to play, because they agreed beforehand that if players end up positive and the games have to be canceled, the players aren't going to be paid. So this is a uniform effort to play these games, right? Not just owners pushing and players saying, hey, wait a minute, we want to call this thing off.
To me, this is a race for the league to get through the season in a way that is socially acceptable to society, right? I don't think there's any other way around it, right? And so, obviously, both groups want to play. There's the option, if you are vaccinated and asymptomatic, to take a test, and that was something that when I was on your show today, Soren, I got wrong and corrected at the end. But now you're not required to take tests if you are vaccinated or asymptomatic, but you can if you want to. And if you have COVID, then you are put in the protocols. So that is what's happened with a few Chiefs players this week.
What do we call it? What we call it? Don't ask, don't tell.
That's it, right? And like, don't ask, don't tell. A classic example of something that was trying to solve a tough problem in the most socially acceptable way at the time, of course, right? So that I think is what they're trying to do here. I don't think it's going to stop the spread of the virus. I think that they open themselves up to, if Omicron is something that is getting people sick, and my source does say that there are that the players that are getting tested have symptoms. So the real leak that the league has is, if this is something that actually affects the players, then they're, I think, in real trouble. I think they've already punted on the societal impact of it, which is players are going to be spreading this to other people within the community, and we're still going to have the same problems on the community level. I think that they've punted on that. I think that they're probably right in that the country at large is not going to hold them all that responsible for that, and they're just going to move on with this.
But the country has punted on it, right?
Yeah.
I know we always want to hold the NFL and NBA and NHL and Major League Baseball and all our sports leagues and all our athletes. They have to adhere to the highest standard. Meanwhile, the rest of the country goes on about whatever's easiest and most convenient for them at that moment. That's basically what is usually done by the general public. I'm with you. I mean, I don't think this is the best move for containing COVID in each one of these communities, but I don't know that anyone else in any other walk of life is doing absolutely what's best. On a corporate wide basis. I don't know how many companies are actually doing that, and why we would hold the NFL to a higher standard than most of us are most companies are holding themselves to. Or am I wrong, Jeff?
No, you're right. But the irony here is that when COVID really blew up, back in 2020, the NFL had the luxury of having their season already played out and being able to sit back and watch everybody else handle it. So what's the NBA going to do? What's Major League Baseball going to do? What's college football? They were the last ones to really have to worry about it. And now they're front and center. And you're seeing other leagues like the NHL say, we're going to pause for a little bit. You're seeing people say, we're not going to go to the Olympics now. We're pulling athletes out of here. The NBA is trying to figure out what they're going to do and being conservative about it. So in a lot of ways, the NFL is having to show people what they think about all this stuff. And I'm to the point with it where I feel like it isn't that different than a bunch of guys having the flu or a bunch of guys having torn ACLs, that it's the symptoms that come with, or the consequences that come with having Omicron, are not nearly as dire as they were with the Delta variant. And so if you have a team that's dealing with those kinds of issues, then you're probably still going to go out and play games.
Yeah, I think that the big issue, though, right, is, and I guess like this is me just being overly cautious, because when COVID was first a thing, right, I think that the rational response was exactly yours, Jeff, which and I agreed with it, which was the majority of these things, whether it be H1N1, SARS, Ebola, most of those things end up mutating away and not being a huge deal, right? I think that the big issue, and I agree that Omicron does appear to be not less infectious, but less
Damaging.
Damaging to a person. I think that the real issue that we're just going to have to deal with the risks and the consequences of, if we're wrong, is if we allow this to happen, what does the next mutation look like? Chances are the next mutation is going to be less infectious and less dire for who gets it, right? It's going to be a lot like the flu, right? In 1919, the Spanish flu was a pandemic that killed a lot of people. And now the flu in its current form is hardly that, right? And you don't have to have nearly the vaccination rates to make it work and stuff like that. Chances are COVID is going to end up in that state where it's just endemic and we deal with it and people die from it, but not at that higher rate. But like, we don't know, right? And I guess like the NFL is, I guess, taking a chance that's going to be what happens. And, it could be rational. It might not be. Who knows?
Would the NFL, how about the question I had up there from Aaron? And by the way, you can hit us up in the chat room on the Facebook, on Twitch, on YouTube, on those formats if you're checking out Red, Gold, and Bold there. Once in a while, would the NFL hold things up for a week and eliminate the Pro Bowl, or just push back the Super Bowl? Last year there was a lot of talk about how they had the building for that week and the next week and maybe the next couple of weeks. I mean, one thing about not setting parameters about what it takes to pause, right, or to stop a game or to cancel a game is you leave yourself a lot of wiggle room to try to find solutions on the fly. And as we know, this is an ever-evolving situation. Would the NFL say, all right, let's hold up a week. Let's just send everybody home for 7 days. Let's find out who's got it, who doesn't. Let's quarantine them, and let's see if we can at least, go back to last year's standards after we try to get our arms around this. Would the NFL consider doing that, Jeff?
I have to go back and look at just what was written and what was said and reported at that time. I thought with the 17th game being put in there that it made that a lot trickier of a proposition than with a 16-game schedule, which is why they were talking about ultimately canceling games or forfeiting games if this thing got out of control. And so I don't know if that option is as easy to go to as it would be in other sports leagues. But yeah, it certainly would make a lot of sense. But again, you're talking about they want the Super Bowl in LA. This is their crown jewel, what they've been dying to have for decades. You start losing those opportunities. They don't want to play this game in April. So yeah, I think they're going to push forward and steamroll through the season just as they did last year.
They finally get their LA Super Bowl, and this is the way it's going to look. I think that's kind of interesting. All right, let's focus on the Chiefs' perspective of things on this. What I heard, the people I've talked to, I said, listen, is this game going to move? Where are you? Where's the number on where you got to get to? It sounds to me like it's around 20. The Chiefs sit at 14 right now, but 4 of those are players from last week that you would expect that we may find out come tomorrow when Andy Reid goes to sits down to his laptop for his Zoom, as there'll be no more podiums now as we're purely Zoom on all of these meetings. When he gets on the Zoom, usually his mode is, I don't have anything on the injuries. I'll get that to you later, which is his way of burying it until after practice. I don't know that he's going to be able to completely avoid it come tomorrow. He's going to have to talk about it in some way. I would think we would find out about last week's. Is Chris Jones already back? Are those players back in the mix? 20 is the number I kind of heard. I heard it didn't look like it was going to move right now, that they were going to make it by, but it could be close because every day we watch this unfold, Jeff, with Cleveland, and, the next day a couple more, the next day a few more. I mean, I think we'd be naive to not think that there aren't going to be a couple more names from the Chiefs out of this mix. Maybe not, hopefully not, but certainly possibly.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like you look at other teams and what's happened there, it would be very naive to think you're not going to hear more names popping up in the next day or two. And this goes back to, I know a friend of mine was telling me that after the previous game that they played against Denver, a lot of these guys were at Ale House down in Kansas City, Westport area, partying and hanging out after the game. So you don't know how many people were there. You don't know where their kids were. This is a time of year people have a lot of holiday events going on and parties anyway. Not trying to blame it all on one bar, but these guys are hanging out and partying. They're enjoying life. They weren't doing these things last year. It was go home, stay locked up, and make the best of it. And so, yeah, I think there'll be more people coming, more names on the list coming. Is 20 going to be what pushes it over the top? We'll see. But like you said, right now with 13, 14, you go back to 10 with the 4 guys coming back in. I just feel like they're going to end up playing this game. I don't see where they're going to have enough people to force the NFL's hand and move it.
Yeah. Eric, why is it worse this year for the Chiefs? Is it just this is more contagious? Is it just all of society let their guard down and the whole league is getting hit like society is getting hit right now with massive numbers? Is it as simple as that, or did the Chiefs do something wrong?
No, I mean, look, I'm a guy who just literally flew to New York City and went to the Army-Navy game, right? Like we're trying, like we are doing things that are more normal. And, and I don't nearly like, the thing is it's the mathematics of it all, right? Like, and we did think that the virus, that we did think the vaccine would work, and the vaccine did work pretty long into this, right? We got to the second variant before any of this stuff really took shape in the NFL. Sometimes things are just bad luck, right? Like sometimes things are just, and it's not really, their fault. Again, I don't think, like, to me, again, like this is one thing where society in general, it kind of failed the NFL in some ways, right? Like the vaccination rate for the NFL players and coaches and all that is 90%, 95% on some teams. And, and part of that is that everybody on the team is an adult. So like, but even among adults who are eligible, right? Because kids can't get vaccinated and like there's issues there, right? With community spread and stuff like that. But like, even among like adults that can get the vaccine, we're under 80%. And we all knew that this had to be higher than that for these variants not to pop up. Right. So, I mean, you have a lot of forces at play. So I'm not really going to blame the Chiefs here. I'm not going to blame any of the teams. Like even a team with a lot of unvaccinated players, it's like, there was still a high enough vaccination rate where it probably should have been better than the public at large. So I have a hard time really judging them any more than I'm judging sort of the average society, person in society, I guess.
How does this change? We mentioned this today. You thought about the odds had been 9.5, 10.5. You would bring it down to 6.5. I've seen 7.5 on a number of sportsbooks since we talked. Is that the right spread from a betting perspective? And do you think that that's the right measuring stick? It would seem like this should move it more than a couple of points.
Well, the only players that really – so there's two ways to change the betting markets by more than a point or two, and it's quarterbacks and it's cluster injuries. So right now, the only thing that sort of qualifies for the Chiefs right now is pass catcher. And, from what from what I've heard, there's a decent chance that Kelce plays. There's a decent chance that Ward plays. The guys that became positive today it's less of a sure thing because there's a lot of symptomatic players there, but it's also like a day or two later. So like, I kind of agree with it. I think it's kind of splitting the difference too, because like, and no one wants to say this, but like, how far is Pat away from this? Right. Like it's not like, I mean, and again, there's no judgment here. I'm just trying to put together the pieces, but like his girlfriend, fiance, I mean, she's with the soccer teams, right? She's active in the community, right? And like brother, people that live with him are active in the community, and they bring they bring that stuff home. And then he's on a team with a bunch of players who have COVID-19, and so the betting markets they just don't want this exposure, right? So they're going to put it at 7.5. Beg you to bet the Steelers. If Pat plays, it's probably a fair number. If Pat doesn't play, then they're like the risk to them is them putting it at 2.5, and then Pat plays, and then he fillets the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they're stuck with a ton of exposure. So I think they're trying to sort of split the difference because there's still a ton of uncertainty there.
Jeff, I know you're not the gambler in the bunch, but everybody in Kansas City sits around asking for fun, who's more valuable, Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce? And the answer oftentimes, I think the best answer is yes, both, mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Both are on the list. If both don't play, listen, this if the betting market's right, then the GM's got it all wrong in how they pay players, because 120 of 200 million should be going to Patrick Mahomes, and the other 80 should be split up amongst the other 52. If that's all that two superstars like that, you're say what charitably number 2 and number 3 corner, or maybe L'Jarius needs your one. You want to make it easy, but your number 2 and your nickel corner are down. Your backup tight end is down, right? Yeah. Starting right tackle is down, and it means 2 points. I mean, that would seem odd.
Well, what was the line when they were playing Tampa in the Super Bowl when all those linemen were out? Does anybody remember what that was?
Yeah, Eric, what was that? Chiefs by 7?
Mm-hmm. Over Tampa. Well, there you go. There you go. You saw how wrong that was, right? I think this feels the same way. This feels like, look, any game they play without Hill and Kelce, their odds of winning are not very high. And as great as Patrick Mahomes is, you take away those two guys, and it's a whole different way of defending them. And so, yeah, this is a big deal because as mediocre as the Steelers are as a team, especially on offense, they still have a lot of good defensive players, and they still have a smart coach. And you saw what happened to Ryan Tannehill. And I'm not trying to say Ryan Tannehill is the same thing as Patrick Mahomes, but all of a sudden that offense that was ran through the Chiefs, back in October, couldn't function. 13 points and like 3 or 4 turnovers all in the second half. They were dropping snaps. throwing bad interceptions. And so, yeah, you start taking away. Look at the Chargers game. What was he, 22 for 26 to Hill and Kelce in that game, and like 7 for whatever it was, 15 to everybody else? If you're going out there and trying to rely on McCole Hardman and Byron Pringle and Blake Bell's out there too, right? Noah Gray. I think it's a tough road to hoe. I thought this game was already going to be a bit of a scuffle because that's how Pittsburgh just plays teams and they pull you into these really ugly games. But without those two, yeah, I could easily see them losing.
Yeah, I see the scenario. I already had the one thing I think that might not bode well, but if there was any sense of we've climbed the summit by getting the number 1 seed, and so that there would be a letdown after fighting hard since week 7 to get back to this point. That goes away, obviously, when some of your best players are out, right? Like, I have my theory. I always like betting on a team that's playing on a good team that's playing with its backup quarterback for one game and one game only. Like, there's a circle of wagons. We all got to be sharp. We all got to get on top of it. And we got to be at our best. And I think that's a good spot to be in. And I think that may be what you get from the rest of the 53. The question is the rest of the 53 good enough to beat a Steeler team, right? I think that's one of the big questions here. How good is this Steeler team, Jeff? How good do you think the Steelers are? They've got a negative point differential of 44 points. They're 7-6-1, which, I mean, to me, this is a testament to Mike Tomlin, but they're the 21st offense, the 21st defense. That was before the games tonight, so that may have moved around a little bit. That says mediocrity everywhere except for the guy on the sidelines. I mean, but the guy, I think that's almost canceled out because the guy on the other sidelines, unless Andy Reid ends up COVID positive, will cancel out any sharpness that he has, right? Like, 2 good coaches should cancel each other out. You get great roster, bad coach, up against great coach and pretty good roster, a fair fight. But, where Mike Tomlin has made his bones, I think, is being able to out-coach some of the other coaches. That would seem to be neutralized in this game, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, I get the point you're making, but I'll go back to the point I made about the Tennessee game, where if as mediocre as the Steelers are, and I've been as down on the Steelers as anybody this year, again, when the opponent is hampered, you look a lot better. And TJ Watt's still over there. Cameron Hayward's still over there. Devin Bush is over there. Minka Fitzpatrick. Joe Hayden made a big play. He just came back and made a big play in the Tennessee game. If you look at the Chiefs roster without the Chiefs offensive roster without those players that we're talking about, Hill and Kelce, it's a whole different story. And as well as they're playing defensively, where Mike Tomlin is smart enough to understand this, is that he's not going to put that offense into a position where they're going to decide the game. Like, he's more than willing to play whatever, 13-10, 16-10, 9-7 football to win. Look at Tom Brady. God, look at Tom Brady last week against New Orleans. Look at what he became. He went from being the leading MVP candidate to being a guy you thought maybe it's time for him to go. Because that offense.
The styles we've talked about it before. Sorry to interrupt you, Jeff. I apologize. Yeah. There's a little bit of the styles make fights in that Saints-Bucs, right? The way that the Chiefs have dominated the Raiders. I mean, the Saints have, like, if you want a blueprint, get nasty defensive linemen that get in Tom Brady's face, and the Saints consistently do that. And we've seen that be a problem, going all the way back to his losses in the Super Bowl with the Giants. They seem to have that recipe better than anybody else right now, even though they're got a lot of problems on the offensive side of the ball. They can at least do that. I'm with you. I mean, on any given Sunday, right? It can look ugly for just about anybody. The question is, do the Steelers have whatever the kryptonite is, right? Whatever the bad matchup is for the Chiefs.
Well, I think they have it in the pass rush. If TJ Watt is healthy and he's been up and down, I think he had a rib injury last week and he's had a groin that he's been fighting with. That's a game changer. I think he's the kind of guy who can give an offensive line without a right tackle who's on this list, Niang, Orlando Brown, that he can create problems for them. And then I always say this about offense. When you're playing defense, you worry about things that scare you. You don't worry about things that don't scare you. And you start taking away things that scare you, like Tyreek Hill running past you, or how you're going to defend Travis Kelce in the middle of the field. All of a sudden, your defensive coordinator becomes a lot smarter. and a lot more aggressive and a lot more creative. And that's what you have to deal with if you're the Chiefs, if they go into this game without their starting tight end and starting receiver. Just, do you have enough weapons outside of those two that you trust to make plays for you? And we've had this conversation over and over again about Byron Pringle and McCole Hardman and Demarcus Robinson. I just don't think you line up with those three guys and whatever, a rookie tight end, and you scare the Pittsburgh Steelers on defense.
Yeah. How about it, Eric? Do the Steelers have the pieces that could be a bad matchup for the Chiefs?
If Kelce plays, no. Like, Devin Bush is lost, right? Like, that guy is small, he's stiff, he's slow, and like if the Chiefs, could, like with Kelce is that sort of middle of the field player for them against him, I think they can still have success, much in the same way that they had success in the middle of the field with Kelce against the Chargers, right? Like Kenneth Murray is similarly young linebacker who struggles at times with making plays in the middle of the field. Their defensive backs aren't the greatest, but they somehow they don't fall apart because in many ways I think because of that schedule of opposing receivers they've had. But again, the Chiefs in this game might not have Hill, so that's an issue up front. If the Chiefs have their starting offensive line, I think they're fine against the Steelers' defensive line because they'll help against Watt, and they don't have that like Bud Dupree or Melvin Ingram player across from him to make a lot of plays. I believe it was Taco Charlton made some plays. I mean, but like he's a guy who was kind of a nobody across for the Chiefs last year, and again, not someone I'm super worried about. So on the defensive side of the ball, no. On the offensive side of the ball, Freiermuth's the one that scares me because the Chiefs have always been good against wide receivers and have always struggled against tight ends. And and the Chargers went after Jared Cook against the Chiefs, and he sucked, and so that helped them a lot. But Freiermuth is a player that I think will hang on to the balls that come his way, and so the Chiefs have to be ready for that. I don't think the Steelers are very good. I think their point differentials are really reflective of who they are as a team. So I'm not particularly worried about them unless something catastrophic happens to the Chiefs roster before the game.
Is Freiermuth out of the concussion protocol?
I don't know.
I'm not sure about that. So that's something.
Yeah.
They have
Ebron too. Like they're pretty solid as far as like
they are.
But I also love how Eric doesn't think 13 guys on the COVID list is catastrophic.
Well, I get, but like it's uncertain though, right? Like how many guys come back, right? Like the Rams had Von Miller, and then he comes off it.
Wait a minute, answer that question. If none of them come back, right? If Chris Jones isn't back, I don't expect that to be the case. I expect Chris Jones to be back. But let's take it at the worst case scenario. Jeff's kind of putting it out there.
Everybody but Mahomes. I still think the Chiefs should be favored in this game.
Well, will they win? That's what they be favored. Will they win the game?
And I think that's the gambler's answer, though.
Yeah.
Gambler's answer is never that anything's a certainty. It's about whether or not the odds are in your favor and you can make money off of it if you bet it over and over again. So Eric's smart. I mean, anyone who tells you this team can't lose is a moron. And a gambler would never say that. A gambler's just looking for the advantage. Yeah. So I get where he's coming at on not committing to they will win. He's just saying the odds would be there. They'll win more times if they play more times. But I do want to define it. No Chris Jones, no Willie Gay, no Charvarius Ward, no Rashad Fenton. Who else are we talking about on the defensive side of the ball? I'm trying to quantify all the defensive guys. No Nick Bolton, by the way, who played very well against the tight ends of the Chargers, right? He had a big he knocked down one of the passes on fourth down when they were trying to get to the tight end. So he played better in coverage than maybe he's supposed to be able to. He's not there. No Tyreek Hill, no Travis Kelce, no Lucas Niang. All those things. Still, you're good with the Chiefs being the favorite.
Steelers suck.
So were you calling the Bucs as losers last year in Super Bowl then with the offensive line issues?
I mean, the Chiefs are favored by 3. Like, I mean, and again, like I agree. Like, for one, if you run back last year's Super Bowl, knowing everything we know, how many times did the Bucs win?
10 out of 10.
No, I wouldn't go that far, but
10 out of 10.
But I don't think it's 5 out of 5 either.
I think the Bucs win 6 out of 10 times.
If you run it out of 10.
If you convert the first drive that ends in a field goal to a touchdown, if Tyrann Mathieu's if Tyrann Mathieu's interception counts, if Pat, I mean, like these games, like, they snowball, right? But like that's my point. Like, these games snowball, and I agree. Tampa Bay should have been favored in that game if we knew the effect of the offensive line and how good Todd Bowles was going to be and all that kind of stuff. I still think, again, like here's the other thing. The Steelers stink compared to Tampa, right? Like, we're not, like, the offensive coordinator's bad. The head coach is great, but he's also, like, meeting an equal here. Like, he can win.
Let me ask you this. The Ravens were within a 2-point conversion of beating the Packers.
And the Steelers.
How does that happen? How does that happen?
Well, you're making a case actually for Eric based upon what you're saying with the differential. I mean, based on that, then you're making a case for why the Chiefs would beat the Bucs at least one time. It makes your 10 out of 10 foolish if you're saying, how does that happen? Because I would think that scenario would play out with a Hall of Fame coach in Andy Reid and what looks like
football is a fundamentally noisy game, right? Like, that's why a team with, like, I mean, if you want to look at what a well-coached team can do with no players, look at the Ravens. And the Ravens, again, at home, which the Chiefs will be, against a team the Packers aren't full strength, but they're full strength enough to be, they were 9.5-point favorites or whatever that ended up being, 8.5 maybe. And Tyler Huntley, they put a good game plan around him, and they had some success.
Yeah, I'll jump on Eric's side on that one. I mean, I also think if Andy Reid gets a chance to game plan it, I think if the Britt Reid situation doesn't happen, I think it could be very different. But I think with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, you got a fighting chance. If you want to talk about winning without talent, see the entire season that is 2013 for the Chiefs. Because go back and look at the talent. It sucks. It sucks. The talent on the Chiefs sucks. And
in 2013?
Yes.
They didn't have any Pro Bowl players in 2013. Nobody on that team went to
that
Pro
offense
Bowl.
that offense was horrendous.
But
right?
You guys are going off offense. I'm talking. They had a great defense, right?
What did they have on defense? What was the great defense?
They had Justin Houston, right? Tom Bahali.
Marcus Cooper was
Eric Berry still there?
The remnants.
Was Eric Berry a Pro Bowl safety at that point?
Yeah, I look. I think, but if you look at
Derek
that offense,
Johnson, those guys suck.
I don't think those guys suck, but they also were dealing with Marcus Cooper at corner, Dante Robinson at corner.
I'm going to give you the
same thing as DeMarcus Robinson.
I think it's actually. I think the case you want to make, Petro, is 14 when they go 9-7 without a wide receiver catching a TD pass, and Josh Mauga playing linebacker next to who is the James Michael Johnson, because Derek Johnson got hurt. Marcus Cooper.
Listen,
Phillip Gaines.
Just for the sake of argument, the 2013 Chiefs, Dwayne Bowe and Donnie Avery on the outside, Brandon Albert, Jeff Allen, Rodney Hudson, John Asamoah, and Eric Fisher. Fisher was on the right side. Brandon Albert was on the left side.
He was a Pro Bowl player, wasn't he, Brandon Albert?
I don't think so, but he might have made it once as like an alternate or something. Rodney Hudson was a Pro Bowl center. Yeah. I would grant you that. Alex Smith, Anthony Sherman, Jamal Charles.
There's 2 other guys who went to the Pro Bowl in their careers.
Tyson Jackson, Dontari Poe, Mike DeVito, Justin Houston, Akeem Jordan, Derek Johnson. This is way late in Derek Johnson's career. It's way late in Tom Bahali's career.
I love how I just dismissed these guys.
Brandon Flowers, Eric Berry, Kendrick Lewis, Sean Smith.
Okay, so that's probably 7 or 8 Pro Bowl players.
And Marcus Cooper was playing. Marcus Cooper was playing snaps.
How is Marcus Cooper a litmus test for this team?
Because Marcus Cooper was a 7th-round pick of the Niners who got cut and then was out there getting absolutely toasted by Demaryius Thomas for 4 touchdowns.
And what is Charvarius Ward?
Or whoever it was.
What is Charvarius Ward?
Rest in peace.
Or Bashad Breeland.
Let me back up. What is the point?
The point I'm making here is that every team, unless you're out there walking out there with the 88 Niners or the 92 Cowboys, is going to look like that. Only difference is you're going to add maybe 1 or 2 guys in there who are Pro Bowl caliber players. So when you take away star players like Travis Kelce or like Tyreek Hill, it's going to have a profound impact on your team. Just as if you take away your two starting your offensive tackles, it's going to have a profound impact on your team. I get that Patrick Mahomes is a phenomenal quarterback, but you saw what happened when he didn't have those people.
And I think your point is there are key players. Like, you won't quibble with Eric that they're the guys that are what I call the mortar players, right? You can kind of swap the mortar in and out wherever you need to. But when you get to the bricks, the foundation guys, when those guys get taken away, you got problems.
Chief got 6 players they can't lose.
Yeah, and
two of them are on this list.
I agree. I do think Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce is a big blow. I mean, I think it's big. I'm on Jeff's side with that. I think overall, I do think the Steelers are bad, and I think Mike Tomlin's game management won't carry as much weight against a team that can manage the game.
The Detroit Lions suck. They just beat the Cardinals by 18 points.
Well, that's every. But like Jeff, you're making the point for me that like if the Chiefs don't have any of the hashtag good players, they could still win this game because like the Lions were playing a guy at outside corner on Sunday who had a combined 13 snaps at corner in his career prior to the game against an MVP candidate in Kyler Murray and locked him down. Like if we can, I mean, the Chiefs backups beat Denver in Patrick Mahomes' first start. Like that's why none of these things are more than like 7 out of 10. Yeah, but
right? I think you're talking past each other because I think Eric, you hear Jeff saying, "Okay, bad teams can win." You're like, "Yeah, see, the Chiefs can," and he's saying, "No, I'm saying the bad team is the Steelers."
Yeah,
and if you win the Cardinals,
okay, yeah. But I don't think I'm saying the Steelers can't win this game. I'm saying that like if you put Pat out there with a bunch of practice squad guys, I still think the Chiefs will be favored. Maybe it's 2.5
because the quarterback and this quarterback means that much in your opinion.
Yeah, like maybe it's 6 out of 10. Let's say 6. If you roll the ball out there with a bunch of practice squad guys and Pat and Andy, the Chiefs win 6 out of 10 of those games against the Steelers at full strength. That's what I think. Big Ben stinks, dude. He's like a water buffalo in the box.
But that's what I'm saying. If the argument is that the Steelers suck and they're so bad that whoever you put out there is going to beat them, what I'm saying is that, like Soren's saying, the Chiefs can reach a point where they are not as good as that team, no matter who they have playing quarterback or who's coaching.
Which comes back to Eric's point that this year's Steelers are not last year's Bucs, and so they're not nearly as dangerous and able to take advantage of the losses that the Chiefs have. I do want to say 2 things here. One, Eric Eager called for a winless Lions team to get its first win against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They were a double-digit dog, and they tied. And then he called for the winless Lions to get their first win against the Vikings, who were holding a playoff spot at that point, I think, and they did. So there is some juice behind his predictions.
He also called for the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl last year.
He did. Yes. Fair.
That'll balance it out.
As did I. There are red and gold glasses in both of our glasses cases. I do, but Jeff, I want you to walk this back though. So those are right. That is okay. I think it's and I do it myself. But when I look back and say, okay, what did I miss about that Super Bowl? I do agree with Eric. There are scenarios where the Chiefs win that game, but I don't think they win it more than 5 times. Right? I don't even think they win it 5 times. I think they were damaged enough. I missed the point. And I think to me the big one was Eric Fisher was a bridge too far. If you've ever seen that military movie, there's only so many losses you can handle. So far you can go. And when they lost Eric Fisher, that was it. That's the one thing I took away from it is just because you've survived other losses doesn't mean you can take on one more, and it doesn't matter. That's what I learned from it. But I want to ask you, what did you learn from making a bet? And I'm not trying to rub this in, but Eric and I both admitted where we're wrong. Right now, according to ESPN, you're 99% to lose the bet you made that the Chiefs wouldn't make the playoffs. When you look at it now, when they were 3-4, and you and most people, frankly, were convinced, and many people, not everybody, and probably not most in Kansas City, but many in Kansas City were ready to write off the Chiefs as a playoff team. How would you look at that now and say, okay, here's the part that I missed?
I missed Aaron Rodgers getting COVID and not playing in the Packers game. I missed Amari Cooper.
This is my
getting
favorite. This is
I
my
missed
favorite
CD
thing of
Lamb
all time.
getting knocked out in the first half of the Cowboys game.
It's still 8-6, and they're in the mix.
What?
Not looking good, even if those two are losses.
I missed the Raiders being hopelessly outcoached.
So you nailed the Chiefs. The Chiefs really aren't that good. The mistake you made is way overrating the entire rest of the NFL.
That's what I did. Yeah, that's what I did. That's exactly what I did.
Did you also miss the Dolphins?
That's exactly what I did.
Like, this is my favorite thing of all time.
Yeah.
Like, did you also miss the Dolphins winning 6 straight? And like,
I did.
I
wrote
if
them
the
off
Chiefs
too.
are 8-6 right now, they have the Dolphins nipping at their heels. Like, I don't know. Like, the thing about the Chiefs was, we all talked about it, right? If look, once the problem became one problem, and again, let's throw the COVID stuff out of here. Let's assume they're full strength. Once the problem became one problem, it became pretty easy to solve, right? Which is, once the problem became, hey Andy, call the good plays, and hey Pat, throw the ball to the right team. It was a wrap. Like, as far as like them becoming a good team, and like the entire history of the Chiefs under Andy Reid, like, does matter, right? Like, it does matter to take that into consideration. And I'll say this a couple other times too. The history of these other teams matters too. When the Raiders are 5-2, they're still the fucking Raiders. I'm sorry. And like that, and as somebody who just cashed Raiders over 6.5 wins, I think I could say that. They're still, like, when the Raiders are 5-2, they're still the Raiders. When Denver gets off to a nice little cute 3-0 start, they're still the Broncos. Okay.
Yeah. See, I wasn't picking those teams.
No, I get it. But some team, and like, look, and when the Chargers
in front of the Chiefs, but Derek, somebody who was in front of the Chiefs that you thought was going to stay in front are now behind him.
Yeah,
and the Chargers,
I put them on that list.
And the Chargers, a talented 8-6, are still the chart. Like, the thing about the Chargers is, which team's going to go 2 for 5 on 4th down and drop 2 touchdowns and have a ball batted down by Daniel Sorensen?
Yeah.
It's the Chargers.
Yeah.
The Chargers are the most talented X and X team every single year. And this year, they just happen to be the most talented 8-6 team. Last year, they were the most talented 7-9 team. The year that they could not beat the tiebreaker with the Chiefs, they were the most talented 12-4 and a wild card team. Like, that was always the handicap with the Chiefs. It's not that the Chiefs are great. And I look, I like this group. I think they resemble 2019 a lot, but I'm not going to sit here and say that they're a juggernaut. But we also did not think they were a juggernaut in 19, right? We were along for the ride and said, oh, this is a fun little year. Let's see what can happen. And that's kind of where they are now. And that's kind of who they are.
Yeah, and the danger in those, and you're right, those teams, including the Chargers, have screwed up. But the danger that comes with a team like the Chiefs, with a generational quarterback and a Hall of Fame coach, is that you can apply that theory to everybody they play. And that's what I'm saying about the Bucs game back in February, which is like that mindset of like, well, Chiefs will win because they win. That's what happens. Sooner or later, a team screws up, team that falls apart. That's not how you win games or win consistently or win championships in this league. You win them by actually being the better team. And so the better team is not always what you have on the roster. It's what you're walking out there with.
That's true. That's true. But I don't think you're a fool to say a team that's won 14 of its last 15 games that actually tried in should win. Okay, so
I don't think so. No.
But, I mean, there was a lot for people to be blinded about for the Chiefs in that game.
It's not the same team. That's the point I'm making. It's not the same team just because it's the same uniforms.
Yeah, but really the only difference was one guy. It
really
was the same team. It was really the same team that just slapped. Was it the Bills in the AFC Championship game? What was the order? I mean,
it was Cleveland with Henny, and then the Bills at home. And that, like, but I agree. There were canaries in the coal mine. Like, look, if we want to back up a little bit. The Chiefs didn't cover the spread from the Jets game to the Bills game. That was a long time of not covering the number, not meeting market expectations. And so and then early in this season, except for the Philly game and the Washington game, they didn't really cover the spread at all until they got to, I think it was even the Green Bay game, they didn't cover close. But like now they're covering every single week. And again, I'm going to back Jeff up a little bit with this. And like, it was not as fundamentally Chiefsy as it had been in the previous 3 years. Like that's true. I think that the issue becomes like just not pricing in the regression. Again, like I said, the Raiders at 5-2 were not winning fluky games. They beat the Ravens. They beat the Steelers. They beat the Broncos. They were impressive, but they're still the Raiders. That's that. It's still Derek Carr. Derek Carr was leading our statistical profile in a lot of categories, right? And he's still going to be Derek Carr when it matters most. And like Pat is having a bad statistical year for him. He's less than 8 yards a pass attempt for the first time in his career, but he's still Patrick Mahomes. Like I think that sort of like that's kind of the issue is Jeff's got a point that there are some fundamental flaws with this team, but to say that they're going to continue was probably a little bit too much. I thought
I think Jeff nailed it as to the problem, and I think Jeff, did you pick the Bucs, Jeff, in that game?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Jeff had the better read on what styles and what matchups were going to make a bigger difference in it, and he was right. I mean, there's no way around that. We can spin yarns about if they played 7,000 times, what would the number be? All we want, it's fun, and jackasses like us like to do that. I will say this, though, where you say canaries in the coal mine about the negativity of the Chiefs, though, those canaries were there, and Eric and I were chirping them at you at 3-4. Right? Mm-hmm. Like the Pat Mahomes is still the quarterback, right? He may not be playing well, but he's there and he has a lineage and a history. And
is he the biggest reason why they've been on a 7-game win streak then? Who was calling for the defense to turn into this juggernaut? 85 Bears. I want to go back and pull that tape. Let me see that tape.
The 2 Raiders games and the Chargers games, Pat won, right?
Yeah, so I think it's a fair point from Jeff, but I'll go back even to the beginning of the season and go back to the first few episodes we did. All of us were singing the praises that this defense we really thought was going to be better, right? Like we were all on that, right?
Yeah, but not this level. Not winning games better.
Listen, I'll never put a number on it.
Better.
I'll never say a defense is good. I could give a crap if somebody's 24 or 16. I don't think there's any difference. I don't think there's any difference. If you're not top 10, I don't care. I don't want to hear it. It's probably schedule and injury driven. Good defenses get into the top 10. And I do think that there is, if we want to talk about canaries in the coal mine to the negative, I think the quantity of yards they still give up is a problem, right? Because I think some of it is they're running into like the Raiders who don't know how to finish a drive. Even last night, I mean, hell, they almost backed their ass out of the way of getting the game-winning field goal a couple of times. They threw a pick, and then they got a penalty to back themselves up. And to Derek Carr's credit, he got him back in there to kick the field goal. But those dumbasses will find a way to not score all the time. I mean, so – like there is still some. I think the defense is better, and we all thought it was going to be. We all kind of called for it to be better, so we can all slap ourselves on the back a little bit on this one on where it is. But there are still some warning signs. Like I think they are a Chris Jones injury away from having real problems because they couldn't sniff Justin Herbert without Chris Jones.
Can we pause for a second though and appreciate what happened on Thursday? Because I think you talked to me about this, Soren, when they played the New England Patriots at home in the game we talked about last year with COVID and stuff, when they gave up the 170 yards to Damian Harris and guys like that. Like, I actually think Spags called as good of a game as he's called all year against the Chargers.
Yes.
Without your best player on the defensive, Chris Jones going into the week had the most pressures generated by any player in the NFL from week 7 on. Once they got that dude into literally more than Aaron Donald, more than Joey Bosa, more than Micah Parsons, literally every player who rushes the passer has been less productive than Chris Jones since he moved back inside. They were without him. They were without their best player on the second level in Willie Gay, and they were without their probably their second best defensive back. And one of the questions, I think Matthews better. I think Matthews the best defensive back, right? So, I mean, you could debate it, whatever. For the sake of argument, say the best player on the 3 levels of the defense. And they enticed the Chargers to run the ball more than to pass it. Even though the Chargers have one of the best quarterbacks, most talented quarterbacks at least, in all of football. And you want to know why, everybody's giving them, Staley crap for going for all the 4th downs and stuff. Because they got them to 4th down, right? And all those 4th downs were 4th and short, right? And that's a product of enticing a team. I'd rather have a team. It's kind of like that playoff game against the Steelers with Le'Veon Bell. I'd rather a team run for 170 on me than throw for 170 to Antonio Brown, right? And so everybody looks at that and they got gashed. Oh, they got gashed. They got the Chargers into high leverage situations and let variance win the game for them. And I thought that was a great move by Spagnuolo. And again, like, to me, that was also one of the things at the beginning of the year where the guy was simply unwilling to do a lot of the tactical things, playing the better players, doing the tactical things like blitzing and all that to win football games. And he did it on Thursday night. Like, the numbers were kind of bad. The numbers are bad, but I think the numbers were bad in a advantageous way for the Chiefs.
I think that was the worst coached big game I've seen since Bill O'Brien came into town. The 2019 playoffs, completely crapped down his leg. So
you don't agree with the fourth down decisions?
No.
So because I'll back the truck up for a second. Yeah. The reason Houston lost to the Chiefs in the 2019 divisional round is because when they were up 21-0, they had 4th down and 1 in Chiefs territory, and that coward kicked a field goal to go up 24. And
let me restate what I'm saying. I agree with being aggressive up until the point you realize your team is not executing at a high level. And once you get to that point where you're watching your team drop touchdown passes, and they dropped 2 in the first half, going forward on 4th down, you got to be thinking psychologically, what does this mean? Can we do this, first of all? And secondly, how is my team going to react if we don't get this? And when they went forward on 4th down and Nick Bolton knocked that pass down to Jared Cook, if you look at the bottom of the screen, you see Keenan Allen's reaction, it's like, throws his hands up in the air. That's not where you want to be in a game like this. So I'm with you. I think they should go for it, and be aggressive on 4th downs. But I also feel like Brandon Staley was coaching against a team that he was coaching that game as if he was facing a team that wasn't actually across from him.
All right. This is a burr in my saddle because I will tell you his 4th downs net of the Chargers plus 2 points. And I think everybody forgets the one he made that turned into
2 he made.
Yeah, 2. And one of them, they don't put those points on the board. Like, those are just erased. It's just the ones at the goal lines. But he made them on drives that ended up being touchdowns. And one of the ones that he went for and didn't get had the Chiefs pinned down against the goal. And 3 plays later had them 1st and goal, and they scored the next possession. And that's one of the reasons why you go for it. I think the only one –
I understand that, yeah.
The only one that I object to is the one that he went for before the half. Because part of the reason you go for it, in my opinion, is it's kind of a safety net. You go for it. Hopefully you get the touchdown. If you do, you're +4 on the point differential. And by the way, you're actually a little bit more because there's the whole fact that you can miss the field goal, right? Like, they actually are not likely to have made 4 field goals.
There's also the fact that the points are not linear. Like,
you're getting super technical now, but
so for example, going up 7 at the very beginning of a game, the points 4, 5, 6, and 7 are worth more than points 1, 2, and 3.
Okay,
I understand.
But just on this level, on just a pure counting category, if you add the 3s and you say, okay, well, he could have taken the 3, so he's -3 there. Where he did go for it and get it, he gets +4, right? That puts him up +1.
No.
And you end up, if you play it out, you're +2. To me, the mistake he made was before the half because you don't have the chance to get the value of the safety net, which is we didn't get it, but now they're pinned down and we can come at them. And hopefully, decent case scenario, we force them to punt on a 3 and out and we get great field position. And we're right back in field goal range after 1 completion already. And even better, we've got to pin down. Maybe we can get a safety. Maybe we get to punt them out of the end zone. Maybe we can get a turnover. And they got that. They got the turnover, were point blank, and scored a touchdown. So the one in the third quarter where they went for it and everyone says, oh, he missed, he blew it. They actually ended up +4 because he ended up 1st and goal and scored in 5 plays. And part of that's because he went for it. He missed that opportunity to take advantage of the Chiefs having to go 99 when he didn't kick the field goal before the half. That's the one I agree he made a mistake. But when everybody talks about this, nobody throws on the fact that Andy Reid went for it on 4th down and didn't get it and took 3 points off the board himself. And I think part of the nature of what Staley's doing is you're playing chess against who you're playing against, right? I think if there's another mistake from Staley, it's not going for 2 to try to go up 9. because I don't think Andy Reid was going to go for 2 if he kept it at 7. Andy Reid wasn't going to go for 2 to go up by 1. So he had a safety net there to go for 2 and still be up 7, where the 2 would have put him up 9 and put him up 2 scores, and that could have been the difference in the game. I think there are holes to shoot in Staley's game management, but I think people are shooting the wrong holes in them.
I think he's like a quarterback who decides where he's throwing the ball as soon as he leaves the huddle.
I think
that's how he coached that game. He coached that game. He said, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to play. And I hate people who coach that way because you're not taking into account what's actually happening in the game. You get up to a point where you have a 10-point lead with 8 minutes to go. It's an entirely different amount of pressure on Patrick Mahomes in that situation. Now, granted, you're not counting on some safety falling down while he's covering Travis Kelce man-to-man, which is a whole different conversation about what they were doing defensively at that point. But still, he was coaching as if he needed 40 points to win that game. He needed 31.
Right.
I guess if Byron Pringle doesn't take that kickoff out of the end zone and get a penalty after the first touchdown and get back up to, like, the Chiefs did enough things to shoot themselves in the foot again, right? It was setting up like a very Chiefs second half of this year game where they crush on the first drive, they semi-crush on the second drive, and they get up 10-0, and then the thing sort of like wallows for the rest of the game, and then this game somehow Pat, because he had to, decided to turn it on. But like the Chiefs left a lot on. Like I agree with what Petro's saying. I think part of, and this is sort of like, I really want to study this because I like it, because I think going for 2 and going for 4th downs, it puts you in game states that you have not played before. And everybody's always like, oh, it's way harder than Madden, blah, blah, blah. I'll say this. Guys that play a lot of Madden, they're not confused by the game being up 5. They're not confused by the game being up 7 or 8. Like, wow. Andy Reid, and there's a great book I think Jonathan Bales wrote, and I read 10 years ago, where he was saying Jason Garrett has really only coached 10 seasons, seems like a lot. That's 160 games. Like, half those games you're never even dealing with high leverage stuff. So you're talking about 80 games, and how many reps does the guy really have mentally in these situations? And so I like Staley's approach, if only it screws with the head. Like, everybody knows how to handle a 17-10 score. Not that many people know how to handle a 21-13 score or a 20-13. You just got done scoring a touchdown. What do you do here? Score. And I think creating sort of odd scores elicits a situation that the other team is not willing to do. And to me, that is a plus thing. If you as a team, and I think there are teams like, Baltimore, for example, who are very comfortable with the uncomfortable. And maybe that's why you come up for air and you're like, this Baltimore team's ratty as hell. How are they still winning games? Like, those are, I think that's a plausible answer to that, which is they play a weird brand of football that no one else is used to. And it's harder to adapt.
And Jeff, to your point about and I'm with you. I think it's why Andy Reid, he can't, after there's a game and there's a 4th down decision or there's a 2-point decision or something, he always gets asked the question. He said, listen, there's a lot that goes into it. Yes, there's the numbers, but there's what's available. The biggest part that I don't think, and I talked about this today on the radio show, that play sheet doesn't have 75 plays from the 2. Yeah. Okay. And so if you fired all your bullets, and I think to your point about where Staley may have made a mistake, and Eric doesn't like his offensive coordinator, right? So, Lombardi. And if Lombardi's like, all right, you got to sit there in your pregame meetings Saturday and whatever, Sunday morning, whenever they do it. Well, what do we got from the 2? What do we got for short distance midfield? They got all their different little scenarios on that chart. And if he goes, I got 5 good ones. If he's rocked and fired all 5 of those, and you're like, I came into this saying we're going for 2 no matter what. We're going for 4th downs no matter what. And your OC has told you, I got 5 bullets, and he's fired those bullets, and you're going for it just because you're hell-bent on you're going for it, then I think that's a mistake. But I also think there is a mentality to it, is there not? Right? Isn't that the non-mathematical side of it? You want to tell your football team, we are balls to the wall all the time. We are all out. I am going to be all out. I believe in you guys. We're going to take advantage of it. Isn't there something to be said for him, especially in year 1, setting a mindset about his team and how he wants them to think and play?
I think that stuff's overblown. I think if you win games, you sound like a genius. If you lose games, you get a lot of scrutiny. And so I understand what you're saying, and I understand what he was trying to accomplish. My issue is that coaching and winning games in the NFL isn't just about bravado, about puffing your chest out, and we're going to be this kind of team, this kind of. It's about understanding situations. That's what Andy Reid does really well. It's what Bill Belichick. It's why Bill Belichick ran the ball 45 times against the Buffalo Bills. He didn't sit around and say, you know what, Mac Jones can do X, Y, and Z, and he's been playing really well. I want to open this up and get after it.
What didn't he understand about the game against the Colts? Because, I mean, we don't get to, lather him up off the win and not say,
You got your ass kicked. I mean, they got into a fight with somebody who was just tougher. They just got pushed around.
Why can't that be the case against the Chargers? I mean, because he played the same mindset that he played the first game and he won.
Yeah, and he was executing at Herbert was playing at a much higher level in that game. He played well in this game. He was playing out of his mind in that game, and they were catching everything in that game. I don't remember anybody having, except for maybe one play where there was an illegal shift. Keenan Allen caught a deep over route right before halftime. But aside from that, they were playing at a super high level offensively. In this game, they weren't playing at that same level. And as a head coach, you got to figure out, okay, as big as this game is, as much as I want to set a tone, to me, it's like I always refer to Rocky movies when trying to draw comparisons to this kind of stuff. This was like Rocky 2 when Apollo's got the game won and his corner man saying, don't go for the knockout. Don't go for the knockout. And what does he do? Goes for the knockout, winds up on his ass, can't get back up. Rocky has 4 more sequels, and Apollo Creed ends up dead in two movies later.
Yeah,
that's what the Chargers did to themselves.
Like you, I like to look to scripted theater to be my guide for sports. So I like to look at WrestleMania 3, where if you remember. I'm just kidding. I mean, I get your point, and I think it's valid, but I think there is validity to it. But I think it sounds to me like you didn't have a problem with him going for fourth down the first time, but the
second time.
When Parham gets kicked, okay, after the second, but then after that call off the dogs, even though he made it after that, even though he was successful twice after that.
Well, I just felt like there were points in that game where you have to say to yourself, as much as I want to be aggressive and as much as I believe in going for on fourth down, 3 points ain't going to hurt me here. And if I believe as much in my quarterback and my team and all this stuff and that, not getting those 4 points here ain't going to hurt us. He coached that game as if he was playing against Bill Walsh over there with Joe Montana and Jerry Rice, and they were going to put 50 points on him no matter what. And to me, that's sends as much of a message to your team as, being conservative in those moments. I think that team played tight. Jared dropped a touchdown pass.
They didn't play tight. They played loose.
They played loose. Yeah, they were dropping the football.
Jeff, I know.
And dropping the ball before we ever got in the air.
I'm not going to compare this Chiefs team to Bill Walsh's Niners. I'm not going to do it. Okay, I'm not going to do it. But we got to meet me halfway. This team's won the AFC West 5 straight years, and they've not lost a road AFC West game since Patrick Mahomes. No, they haven't lost a road AFC West game since 2015, I believe. Right, Soren? I think that's correct.
That's right. Yeah.
So, this idea that the Chiefs aren't this albatross that they have to I reject this. They have, and that's how they played in week 3, and that was I know Mitch on the call, it was kind of an epic call on the Travis Kelce game winner. And he's like, this is the biggest AFC West game in 5 years. And the guy's right. The guy was right. And so if Staley's like, I got to go out and get this game. I get that they're not the Walsh Niners. They've only made, this is, Pat's on pace to get a first round bye in the playoffs every single year he's been the starter for this team, despite the fact the league literally took away the bye halfway through his tenure at quarterback. This is a team. If there's not a team in the NFL to go balls to the wall against, who is it? If it's not Kansas City.
All I know is I remember not that long ago, the Tennessee Titans beat this team 27-3. And they kicked some field goals, didn't they, in that game? They kicked some field goals in that game?
Hill.
They going for a fourth down in that game?
The Bucs got shut out by the New Orleans Saints, who did not have a head coach like 2 days ago. Like, stuff happens. And like the Niners, look, the last super team that's been in the NFL, the 94 Niners with Deion Sanders, Ken Norton Jr., Steve Young, George Seifert, Jerry, they lost 40-8 to a Rich Kotites Philadelphia Eagles. This stuff happens.
Right.
An anomaly, huh?
Yeah, but that's the one that
They're
was
10-4 and they're the 1 seed. The first part of the season is an anomaly.
Yeah.
Like,
and
that's
you
what
were
they've
the one
shown.
about the Lions beating the Cardinals. Are you saying the Lions are better than the Cardinals?
No, I'm not. All I'm saying is we're going all over the place for this conversation now. All I'm saying is the Chargers walked into this game with house money. They'd already beaten the Chiefs in Arrowhead and played well against them. They didn't have to go out here and do crazy things to beat them again.
The AFC West. They had to. It's over now. It's all over. They have like a 5% chance to win the division now. They did not have House's money. They pissed away House's money for the last 2 months after they beat the Chiefs. Like, they had to win.
They were a game back. They had to win to
they're the Chargers. And they're the Chargers. Even if they would have won the game, we all know they would have like screwed up one of the last 3, and the Chiefs would have somehow figured out to get the division anyway. Like, they had to win this game.
Right.
Like they played like that, and good on Staley, right? Good on him, and they should have won the game, right, Petro? Like, Chiefs fans, they should have won the game, and they played like that, and kudos to them.
I'll stop short. I won't say they should have won the game. Because I think when you have Andy Reid and you have Mahomes and you have clock, there's reason to believe that the Chiefs are going to get you. But I think Staley did what he needed to do to win, and I think he's doing the right thing, big picture. And I think
I agree with that. I
think he's been very honest when he stands at the podium and goes, "With this offense and this quarterback, that's how we're going to play." And I think in the long run, it's going to serve him well. I will give this pushback to the analytics. That all the analytics are a historical view of what's come before this point. And coaches' jobs are to figure out what's going to come next. And I think we did see a very clear picture of once everybody is now looking at the new numbers and the new math, then they react differently. And so you have to be prepared to coach differently. And this, I think, will back up Jeff a little bit because I think every time they went for it on 4th down in the first game, Spagnuolo was like, well, what? Herbert's still out there? I got to come up with something. And you could see the Chiefs defenders like, wait a minute, we're still out here? And then all of a sudden they're kind of scrambling around looking for where to line up on these 4th downs, and the Chargers were converting them. This time, and Spagnuolo said as much on the coordinator day afterwards, we were ready for them. We had our calls. And I think that's true. You know, Staley and Harbaugh's, the more guys go for it on 4th down, the more the defenses are going to be ready and the more the numbers are going to come back because 4th down numbers are bloated. They're bloated by the fact that they're generally offenses in desperation times. The bulk of the numbers are created by offenses in desperation times against prevent defenses that don't really give a crap if you get the 7 yards you need or the 4 or the 5. They're more worried about giving up points or a big play. So I do think that we're going to find that when the defenses are ready for it, they're going to perform better than the historical math. So you better be ready to tweak what you're doing, which is, to Jeff's point, it's more than just the numbers and the math.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I will say that's the place where if there is that's where look, if I'm running a team, that's where the concession I make is I take, because there's a lot of time spent on special teams, and I get it because you're trying to herd cats from both sides of the ball and you're trying to do these complicated things. Jeff and I probably both played special teams. We know I was a horrible left tackle on punt team. But if I were running a team, that's the concession I would make is, look, we're going to go, special teams are now going to become, everything gets kicked out of the end zone. Everything gets kneeled down in the end zone. We don't get our punts blocked. We fair catch every punt. And we use the other practice time on, as you said, Petro, having more than 5 4th down plays. Because I think that is sort of how that is where they come short. Because again, you only go into a game with so many, you only have, and practice time is going down, right? The number of hours that they're out there. And so you do, that is the issue. The execution like people like me will say the call was right, the execution was bad. And that's not a great excuse to be using year after year after year. Now, I will say this, I said this on your show, 2016 was the first year where more than 0 teams in the NFL went for fourth downs 50% of the time or more when the math says do it. So back then you had the element of surprise, you had the element, all this stuff. 15 teams in the league this year go for fourth downs more than half of the time when situations tell them to. And so people are getting more used to it. And as you said, the pendulum's going to swing back. That's part of football, and that's what makes it fun.
All right, real quick. It's been a fun podcast. We appreciate everybody joining us. What do we think happens in Pittsburgh? Does anyone even want to, or do you want to just punt and say, how the hell do we know sitting here as we record this on a Tuesday night, having no idea who's going to play? Jeff?
If Hill and Kelce play, Chiefs win easily. If they don't, Pittsburgh wins.
Okay. Eric?
Petro, you know how much this pains me. I have no bets on the NFL this week. To me, I think there's way too much uncertainty. And the information, like, there's no way to know, right? Like, there's no way to know who's going to get COVID, how it's going to affect things. So I don't have any bets this week for that reason. Like, and that includes the Chiefs game. I with Jeff, I think if the Chiefs have their full allotment of players, it's going to be hard for Pittsburgh to keep up. I do think if Pat plays, they'll win, independent of who else plays. But yeah, it went from them laying like 9.5, 10, and now it's 7.5. You can see like there's already some uncertainty built in there.
I will say this: if they play without without Kelce and Tyreek Hill, I'll be fascinated. It'll be one of the most entertaining games I've watched, because just to see the true market value of Patrick Mahomes will be an incredible study in football, right? I mean, like I'm not rooting for it as a Chiefs fan, right? And as a guy who lives in Kansas City, and I know what's good for the city is Chiefs wins, but man, I'll be glued to my TV if indeed he has to play without Kelce and Mahomes, or Kelce and Hill, just to see what it is. All right, that's going to do it. Great stuff, guys. A lot of fun. If you are catching us for the first time here via the podcast, we stream live on Facebook, on Twitch, on YouTube. You can join the chat room. Had a lot of folks in the chat room. We appreciate everybody's comments and questions. Always welcome. You can see it. I tweeted out at Soren Petro. You can get Jeff on Twitter at Jeffrey Chadiha. Eric at PFF_Eric is where you will find him. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network and NFL.com, check out his great work there. Eric Eager's work can be found at PFF.com, Pro Football Focus. Their great site is unbelievable. If you're a football fan, you can catch my work on 810WHP.com. I'm live 2 to 6 Central Time on the air on 810WHP. Don't go dying on us, Jeff. Thank you for joining us here on Red Gold and Bold.